on.
We're ready.
All right, the meeting will come back to order. We have a few voting items left over from yesterday. Board Member McClellan, would you be good enough to make a motion?
I move that regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning licenses charge number 2012EYHT2227, that we direct department staff and the State Attorney General's office to prepare the documents necessary to request a formal hearing for the revocation of the holder's license pursuant to section 22-60.5-108 CRS.
It's the proper motion to have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Rankin. Any objection? Unanimous. Board Member McClellan.
I move that regarding disciplinary proceedings
McClellan.
concerning an application charge number 2013JMEM1209, that we table this matter to be brought forward at a later date at the discretion of the State Board of Education Chair.
Second.
Thank you. It's a proper motion. Any objection? Ms. Cordial, did you have a concern?
Board Member McClellan, could you just say that agenda item number
Oh,
before?
my apology. That was that tabling was regarding agenda item 18.04, and I will henceforth read that item number for you.
Proceed.
Okay. Item number 18.05, I move that regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning a license charge number 2014CPDM2111, that we direct the department staff and the State Attorney General's office to prepare the documents necessary to request a formal hearing for the revocation of the holder's license pursuant to section 22-60.5-108 CRS.
It's a proper motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Durham. Any objection?
I object.
Okay, would you call the vote? Call the roll, please.
This is number, I'm sorry, which one?
18.05.
1805.
This is the, yes.
Okay. Board Member Durham.
He just said
Yes.
yes.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying yes, you're ready. Sorry. Board Member Flores.
Yes.
Board Member Goff.
Yes.
Board Member McClellan.
Yes.
Board Member Rankin.
No.
Board Member Shuffle.
Yes.
Board Member Schroeder.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes 6-1.
Item 18.11, I move that regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning an authorization and application charge number 2018EYJR151, that we table this matter to be brought forward at the discretion of the chairwoman of the State Board of Education.
Any objection? Oh, I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any objection, colleagues? That passes unanimously. Once more with feeling.
Item 18.12, I move that regarding disciplinary proceedings concerning a credential charge number 2018JMPR22, to direct department staff and the State Attorney General's office to prepare the documents necessary to request a formal hearing for the revocation of the holder's professional special services provider license pursuant to section 22-60.5-108 CRS.
Do I have a second? Thank you, Board Member Rankin. All in favor?
Yes.
Passes unanimous. Thank you. All right, folks, we have one more item, which is the board members may consider future business at this time. We've had a couple of items that have been brought up during the course of this meeting, few of which I can remember right now, but I'm going to leave it up to our commissioner to remind me next time we have agenda setting, to see what we can put on. Let me finish.
We got
To
this.
see
And
what
then
we-
Eileen on.
Yep, we got this. We're good.
Okay.
You pass it to me, I pass it to her.
All right. My intention here being that the one or two of these items may be on the agenda for next month, but I've also asked Ms. Cordial to start working on a multi-month
At a glance.
at a glance,
Mhm.
so that we have a sense then where some of the items that we've talked about might show up if it's not immediately. a number of the topics, we actually have to give staff some time to prepare the materials that we, to prepare for the information. I do have one item that we've talked about in the past that I want to bring up again to see where you all are, and that is on the issue of multi-district online schools. We had several of them that came before us this past spring, and we asked for some information about different ones. And now I'd like to get that on the agenda, but I also want to know from you what all we want to know. We talked about perhaps changing or increasing the amount of information that we want from the authorizer and from the provider. I think that's the right term. That's going to have the. Do we also want to look at our current multi-district online programs to see how our students are doing in those? I don't know that we have the authority to do a whole lot until they fall onto our accountability clock, but I think in an effort to get a better understanding of this, it might be helpful for us just to look at the status of our students that are enrolled in those. Agreed? Okay. Are there any other things that have come up about multi-online programs that you'd like to have staff prepare information for us to look at?
Is it possible to list all of them and the districts they serve?
Yeah, and I think you and I looked at something like that, but I'm not sure it was fully up to date. So yes, where they are, et cetera. Board Member McClellan, and then you.
Well, I don't know if this is possible under the current law, but trying to determine whether there are operators for whom it is the case that the dollars that are, the per pupil funding dollars that come from the state that follow those students, or that come through the districts and follow those students, if there are particular operators that are not spending those dollars on those students, I don't know if that's something that's trackable and traceable for us, or if that's something we can.
I have no idea.
I don't think so.
Is it even a requirement, do we know? And if it isn't, is it something we could push for in terms of legislation? Could we have our legislative liaisons maybe weigh in if it's possible to ensure that there not be an intent to minimize the expenditure for the benefit, to not treat it like a cash center?
Like what happened in Ohio, with the top hat
Board Member
case.
Durham, you were next.
Yeah, I think, all of the districts that authorize these do take a fee from the provider, from the actual provider, whoever the partner is. I'm not aware of any cases where that's been excessive. I don't, it does add up if there are a lot of students, but I don't think anybody's made any allegations that it's been, that the authorization fees have been excessive. I think with onlines, to me, it's one of the most difficult areas with which we deal, because you're dealing with kids who almost by definition have not done well someplace for whatever set of reasons, and so now they're in this environment, and so I always get worried about trying to hold them to quite the same standard, because I think it's a self-selecting group of kids that choose this, and I think they tend to and those who self-select tend to be those who've not been able to be successful in traditional settings. And I keep coming back to my own personal biases. I think a lot of these kids might not be in school at all if they weren't online. So, but that's no excuse for failure, as I think
No, we have
Dr.
we
Schroeder
have
points out
standards.
pretty regularly. So I think we have to be careful how we go at this, and I hope staff is careful about how, if we can compare apples to apples as to the extent possible with this, and would be helpful.
So one of the things that came up for me in one of the most recent applications was that the provider was setting the graduation requirements for the program, and they didn't meet our guidelines. And so I'm keep trying to figure out what are the questions that we need to remember to ask in order to get a good sense for whether this is an appropriate Colorado program, because it is a Colorado program. It's not just for that district, it's really for the entire. Should we expect the multi-district online school to have the graduation requirements of that particular district? I mean, I would think that would be the expectation. In this particular case, it was not at all. There was no relationship between the two. So these are all items for us to discuss, but would you be good enough to get your comments to either to Joyce or to me or to Busy or Katie on what some other questions are, things that we might want to add to the application piece or that we want to look at for the existing ones?
Do they, for one thing, do they advocate for the child? Like in that memoir of Educated, that was really sad. Nobody was advocating for that child.
I'm not sure that's going to be in the application.
Where were we?
Pardon me?
Where were we when that came out?
Pueblo.
No, it was,
No,
it was the Werfenau.
We were
Are you talking about the
together, 'cause
graduation
I remember
event?
being in the room,
Oh,
whatever, wherever
well,
we were.
that
No,
was-
we were
I think you're right,
Pueblo.
Steve. I think that was in Pueblo.
In Pueblo.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, the Los Alamos?
Los
Is-
Alamos.
Yeah. That's in
Right, I mean, I
Pueblo.
think we want to give this some of our attention. I don't know that we want to discourage, but we want to make sure that these are also high quality. And say in the same way that we look at our charters and schools of innovation, we want to make sure they're the highest quality possible, because any student in Colorado can sign up for these.
Mhm.
So we
Well,
want to make sure they work.
Mhm.
Sign up, but then make sure that the kids are getting the education. Somebody else is not doing their work. Or not doing anything.
Is that a hand up?
Well, yes, okay. Thank you. Are we taking, are you opening this up to just thoughts, or you want this
Well, this is
topic-
definitely,
This topic specifically?
no, anything for future business,
Okay.
folks. Jane has the floor.
Two things, I hope I remember the second one. I think you all probably share this. There have been things popping up regularly now about cell phones in classrooms. More and more, just throw it out there for perusal and thought conversation. The country of France has banned them from their classrooms, and that's the latest in some of this conversation. Just throwing it out there.
They're banned
Con-
in some schools.
Considering we have had it come up here before and maybe in a little bit different connection. The other thing, I wondered if timing might be better to keep in mind about this, but I wonder if at what point, is it a good idea, would it be a good idea to have a check-in on the 4-day week life? If we've got, 98 school districts now, and people are talking around and about Brighton's venture into it, and being the first urbanesque type of school district. I think it's caused some interest in the part of the public. I just wonder if, even if next spring or summer, we could look ahead to see what are the big things we're gonna have to deal with. It doesn't feel like we'll have as much turnaround and accountability clock conversations
Standards.
this year. I'm not promising anything, but, and we're finished with the standards work for now, so I just thought I'd put
So
that out
you
there.
want information?
Yeah,
You'd
we
like to
will,
have-
you
you'd
know, we
like to
will have
information
known.
about the 4-day week?
Yeah, we'll have more of a complete idea about performance by various districts, just to use a little bit of comparison. I don't know,
Okay.
just something,
What was it about cell phones?
I don't know.
Banning
I don't
them.
either.
You know, we have talked for off and on now about screen time.
Katie just offered
And
her cell
whether or
phone if
not
you
the-
wanted it.
this
Just
board
offered them
wants to venture in,
Can take 'em.
wants to venture into any of that policy thinking about.
Well, it's been in the press about that.
Yes, it
That
has.
some districts allow teachers to make that decision, some districts are making that decision. I'm not sure where that goes into our lane, other than
I know,
if
that's
we have
why I'm-
some particular information that we can offer to districts or guidelines, but I
I'm not
don't
pushing
really
for
know.
one position or the other. I just put it out there as a topic that's becoming kind of connected to a lot of other types of topics.
Mr. Durham?
I think Val were you next? I think Val
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
next, I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, Val.
Well, I think everybody has heard my concern about accountability and having a discussion on the topic at discussion where we.
Can you narrow
sit
it down
around-
at all?
I'm sorry?
Can you narrow the topic of accountability down
Well,
to any
we-
particular
Yes,
piece?
we are down to, being accountable for, basically, I mean, we have it down as in our plan for the, that we sent to the feds.
No, to the feds, the
Yeah, to the
ESSA plan.
feds, that we were going to be, accountable for closing the gap. And, I mean, and I'm glad that, you know, to hear that we did it and nobody else did. I'm sorry that no other state, you know, is working on that, but we did. And so now, what do we do? How do we become accountable? Not the districts, we can't say well, it falls on the districts because it's local control, but what are we going to do? What are we going to do to assist in actually closing that gap? What are we gonna do?
Okay. Mr. Durham?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is generally the time that if we have legislative recommendations, we at least need to start thinking about those pretty seriously. So in September, certainly not later than October, we should start locating sponsors if we know we have some things we want to do. I think both the things Ms. Goff mentioned are really very interesting. I doubt if we have, and the way we did it last year is before we went forward with anything, we had consensus. And I think probably we should see if there's any of those items where we might have consensus on that, and hopefully things that we have a reason to believe would make more than just a slight difference in educational outcomes. I mean, I doubt we'll get a consensus on cell phones, but that'd be something I think if there's any empirical evidence, we probably ought to search for it and see, maybe not this year, but next year, if it makes sense to start banning cell phones, which I personally believe it does, then we ought to take a hard look at whether we're willing to be out front on that. So I think part of it is, are there things that we're willing to be out front in that we may not be particularly popular? I think trying to improve the READ Act had opposition, but I think we all agreed, and I think we all still agree that third grade literacy is a critical element in ultimate success of children. Have we done enough? Should we be doing more? I mean, we ought to look at those things that we have reason to believe work and see if we can push it a little harder.
So another way to, I agree with you, but another way to look at that is to look at our strategic plan and then look at what's in our lane
Right.
in making, what are the things we can do or recommend in order to achieve
And-
those goals.
Yeah.
So,
And that kind of follows what I'm,
right,
what
so
I
we,
was suggesting.
it does, exactly. So in looking at multi-district online schools, there may or may not be something that we feel needs to be done.
Right.
I think, I just want to remind you that one of the things that I've requested, that I know staff is getting ready to give us a presentation, is the whole area of dyslexia.
Yep.
And I'm behind on that because I did get some questions from staff on what did I want, and I'm behind on that one, but I'm hoping that that's gonna come up shortly, in an information area, and then we
And
may or
that's-
may not. Other states have passed legislation, I don't know that we know that we need it.
But
But-
it's your district, I remember at that conference that we had, there were, the majority of the people who were there were parents from your district
Well,
who were concerned about it.
they organized and they have had the kind of, concessions or resources provided by the school district that they wanted, as far as I know. So that
Yeah.
ultimately, well, initially the district was not as responsive as they could have been.
Good.
They in fact, are, but I think our concern is more across the state. I think a small district is not in a position to give the kind of response that a larger district can. So I think we ought to ask some questions and make sure that, I don't even clearly understand whether that is a reading deficiency or not, whether it comes under that or whether it comes under special ed, or, those are the kind of things that I would like to understand better. So be ready for that one to show up fairly soon.
Well, I can tell you, Adams 12 is one of the districts that has sort of taken
They,
the new
Yep.
lead on
Right.
a lot of this.
they have.
And they have, it's come up at their board meetings, but there's really a parent group and some educators, of course, who are pushing, let's move with this a little bit better. And there are some resources that they have access to that they are providing, and I've watched them. They're excellent. It was a big help for me. I sat there and kind of relearned and learned for the first time. A lot of little points about it, easy to understand, pick up, hear, very audience-friendly type of way of presenting it. So that's a great idea, and we've talked about it at recent board meetings a little bit. People have spoken to it, but we haven't, thank you, I didn't want to
Yeah.
forget that. That was,
No, it's not been
that's
forgotten.
appreciated. I think that'd be a great thing for us to talk around, get at a little bit, if we want to do something.
And bring that guy
More.
back from the University of Houston. that-
Yeah,
that
there's.
was that expert and has that center.
Yeah. The Adams County in general, a lot of those districts have been renewing an interest in that topic, and everybody could probably benefit by it.
I know I could. Board Member Schaffner?
And generally, I think the effectiveness of special education is of interest to lots of folks.
Sure.
Why it isn't more effective. Huge achievement gaps, just, you know, I think when the
Yeah.
law was originally passed in the 70s, the focus was access, not quality necessarily in closing achievement gaps. And so parents, of course, want accelerated gains to close gaps. Why can't we, what can we do to support that happening as opposed to just access, which is a great first step, but it doesn't go far enough for what parents want.
Is there some information out there that would help us to have a better understanding of this?
There's a lot of good information.
Okay.
We
So
had
we
an
could-
initiative at CDE a couple years ago called Special Education Reinvented when Keith Owen was here.
Mhm.
There were some good strides that began, and I don't know what happened to that group, but I mean, there were some good discussions about what can we do. I think it's a great time.
Yeah,
Okay,
especially given what we learned today.
Right, yeah, with the data.
right. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
I believe we have a few items for our agenda.
Just a couple. Just a couple.
Well, I think it's important we do this now, since we don't have standards. It's an opportunity. It's hard for staff, I recognize that, just in terms of looking at their attempts to address our concern that we previously expressed around dyslexia. I know that's not something that we can just say next meeting, et cetera, but if we get a list, that'll provide an opportunity for staff to know what we're.
I'm so sorry, I hope I'm not too late. I mentioned it during the presentation of the data, but my one issue would have been bringing up anything we can do to tighten up or make more clear the requirement for districts to release test data to
Oh, to
a
parents.
student's own parents
Yeah.
and make it less marshmallowy. Because it ends up reflecting badly on us and impacting participation, or it becomes an argument against participation
Yeah,
in
maybe we should
testing.
move that one up.
Okay.
Because it's not so much about a lot of information, it's just about what have we done, what can we do? I hate to see us need to do legislation, but maybe we do need to put a mandate in there. It's not happening.
I'm sorry, I do have one, and this is perhaps very long range, but I've been toying with this idea that it might be helpful for policymakers, not only across the street, but here and elsewhere. If we were to take, you know, we had, yesterday we went through what was the per pupil expenditure of Douglas County. And we got very different answers. And part of that's due to the fact that we don't break out education costs versus administrative costs versus transportation costs versus physical plant costs versus, and I think it would be very instructive to everyone if we knew what percentage of the education budget was going to what I would characterize as direct instruction and what was going to all other activities. And I think
Administrators.
Yeah, and administrators, because I think at some point it might get the legislature to focus dollars on things that get results as opposed to, you know, here's a bunch more money, keep spending it the way you've been spending it, which is kind of where we end up. And if we could actually if we had a good model on, here's how your money is spent right now. And if you want to increase, if you want more instruction money, then you need to appropriate it directly and only and exclusively for that purpose.
I mean, I read
And it's not, this is not going to help us win a popularity contest, but I do think that, I think it would be extremely helpful if there is a way to target money to educational outcomes. We need to know more about the current allocation of existing expenditures.
Are you suggesting that that's not available on the financial transparency website?
I think it's hard to come by.
it is.
I think it's,
For-
I'm not saying it's not available, but, I mean, when we have, when you don't plug in the federal funds, and when you have a disparity between the president of the board saying it's about $9,000, and we actually all in, it's about $12,000?
It was actually 11,188.
11.9, I thought it was 11.9.
11,1.
Oh, so it was 11.1, all right, so they're still,
$1,000 per kid.
they're still 2/9
Well,
off, yeah.
Can I give an
So
example
that,
of that?
in a minute, because
So
I don't want to lose my train of thought.
I just don't.
I'm just aware of the reality of this state, which is that if you want to talk about transportation, there is no way that one district is like the next in
No, I
terms
agree.
of their costs.
I absolutely,
it's
so I'm
very-
not, I'm
It's
not.
very hard to do that part of it. Now, it may be that we figure out that we figure that part out and that we designate a portion that must go to instruction, teachers and classrooms. I mean, I think that's where you're going, but we have to be really careful to suggest that in a budget, this percentage and that percentage, because the districts are so not even that, within the district, we have such a variety of costs between the communities. Boulder has like 9 towns. They have huge busing up in the mountain areas. Other schools where everybody can walk.
Right,
So
no, I,
those disparities,
Let
just a
me
minute,
give
just a
you-
minute, just a minute.
okay.
Those disparities confound any kind of a formula.
no, and I'm not saying it ought to be necessarily in a formula basis, but this year the legislature had a rather large amount of money to increase education funding. And they simply appropriated it for existing uses. What if they had said this money can only be used to reduce student-teacher ratios?
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. And we know that works. And now let me give you my
Go ahead.
example. 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, we started working on this policy thing, to find out how much money Denver Public Schools was appropriating for teachers and for administrators. Well, I mean, it took us a while, but we found out that Denver Public Schools was spending 3 or 4 times more money than Jefferson County and Douglas County, which were comparable, in administration. I mean, that is unbelievable, 3 to 4 times more money. When Ferrandino was asked the question, he said, well, it's because we have so much money that we have to take care of, in grants and stuff. And because charter school administrators cost so much more, and they are top-heavy on administration. I mean, what do you do with that? It's not going to, it's not going for textbooks and stuff, because I just showed you that they only spend $10 per child per year. And that's for tools. That's terrible.
So
And they're
the-
not, and their classes in
The
some.
dilemma that we have, that I think Board Member Durham pointed out, is how do we figure out what things we can provide guidance on that don't totally fly in the face of the fact that we have a state with local control, and that we have state that has such disparate school districts.
Right, and let me give you another.
I'm sure you have 100 of them. I've been on a
No,
board,
but
I
just
know
one
that too.
more example.
Okay.
And that is Aspen Public Schools. Aspen spends $32,000 per child in early childhood. In one school, $32,000 per child. And when I asked the superintendent, do you know what he told me? This is at Case. He said it was because he serves and chefs to serve, to create food, make food, and create, dishes for kids. And because he has an airline, I mean, he has a school for pilots, he has band, and he has art, and he went on, and it's so hard for him to bring all this money in. He's a fundraiser. And so, it's okay for somebody to spend $32,000 per child in his early childhood school. I don't, 32,000.
Just for the record, since we're on video.
We're ready to adjourn. You have any- You may move.
It's true, move with the
Yeah, no, I know it's true.
All in favor? Bye, thank you, folks.